I just say, if anybody, any of you has an interest in being a docent and taking people through either on a tour group or whatever, it's great fun. It's such a joy to see the place come alive and make connections between where the people have come from, what they've seen, and what we have here, which is so unique. I would suggest that that you look at page 4 in the manual, which you have about responsiveness and the interaction that you can have with visitors. It's really good advice. Personally, I like to, if I have a tour group that may sign me up for it, I like to meet them when they get off their bus, upstairs, outside. They begin to get off the bus. Normally you have people who've never been here before, and it's sort of like, where do we start? I haven't figured out how to include zodiac heads yet, but when they get off the bus, or if I meet them down here, what I like to do is begin to get a sense of who they are and what their interests are. Where are they from? If you get a whole group from Iowa, I'm going to do my tour a little differently than if I've got a mixture of people from New York, Boston, San Francisco, so forth. I know that those people have been to the MFA, the Metropolitan, the Young, so forth. They have a little different background. And so if you can begin to feel them out and find out what their interests are. If you have a French woman, you're going to show her some things. And I also try to find out whether they've been to Yellowstone and Jackson Lake Lodge, or whether they're going there. I treat the rungus differently if they are going from here to Jackson Lake Lodge to have lunch. When we get back into the rungus gallery, you know about that and its connection. So feeling them out is the first thing that I do. Then I often ask them what their main interests are in the tour. Are you interested in wildlife? Because some of them have been on wildlife tour. Are you interested in the artists, in techniques, in stories, or all of the above? Normally they say all of the above, which gives me the freedom to do as I please. And I try to keep interacting with them all the way along. A couple of other docents have different approaches. Jim Byrne will start off by saying, I'm going to take you around and show you my favorite paintings, and I'll tell you why they're my favorites. And if you'd like to go with me, fine. If you'd rather wander on your own, that's okay too. And Ellen Sanford meets her groups by the totem and talks a bit about that. And then she says, this is your tour. And she said, I'm going to make it about 30 to 40 minutes. And I would like you to interrupt me with questions, make comments, whatever. And then I'll show you the highlights. And then at the end, I'll be around to answer questions. So you have the freedom to do different things. Nobody specifies just how you're going to do it. And if I have children in, say, a pickup tour here, I found if you can talk to the children and pick out things, have them look at paintings, whatever, no matter what you do, if you speak to the children about the things, and get them to imagine. The parents are just delighted, and they just follow along like glue. So it's great fun, and that's how I just start with introduction. Any questions on that? I think I talked for 7 minutes, not 5. Or input. Okay. And I also do show them, when I'm here in the lobby, I also give them a plan. And I'll point out, this summer I'll be pointing out the Wapiti and the cafe, the gift shop, often I tell them, I'm not like last summer and probably not this summer, I will be leaving you at the end of the King Gallery, and you can wander through there on your own and get back to this place. So I tell them that ahead of time, sort of what a plan is. Yeah. From Carrie.
Yes, I'd be happy to share copies of the new updated docent manual with anyone who's interested to look at it. So just come find me.
I love doing this gallery, and I often start by saying early on people in wildlife arts went to zoos and menageries, and then they would go back to their studios, make up biblical or mythological themes. And so I'll start off over there with that device over there and say, what would you call this? What would you title this? And then I say, then there's 3 Germans who wanted to go out and paint wildlife in their own environment. And I introduce them to Rieger Friese and William Kunert and talk a little bit about these paintings. I'll tell them more about Carl Rungius in his gallery. And say, look at the contrast. These animals in their own environment. And so, tell kids, what do you see in this one? Do you hear that fire crackling as it burns in the dry grass and so forth? And cold up at the Arctic Circle and so forth. Okay, then depending on the group, I may talk about Rosa Bonheur and some of these others. But this one is why I wanted to do something in here. For years, I heard the story here at the museum that this painting was by Jericho. He had been to the Louvre, and he had seen a Peter Paul Rubens painting of these 2 lions harnessed up to a chariot pulling Catherine de Medici. And Jericho thought that the lions shouldn't be hitched up to a chariot, they should be free. So he copied Rubens' lions without the harness. Okay, I've been looking and looking and looking for the image of those lions. Like 3 days before Jane went to the hospital, she found it for me. And just pass these around.
Found the original Rubens?
Yes. It's in the Louvre.
Great, okay.
And the story is a little different, and I've typed it up for you here.
Thank you.
Dawn said, this is not a very good image. But you know what? It's going to work.
Yeah. It's the same posing.
Yes, it is.
Exactly.
It's the very same lions down
The
here.
heads are turned. Exactly.
And the story is that it's Marie de Medici who comes to Lyon, and she meets her husband, Henry IV, and that's their engagement. And they are represented in the painting as Jupiter and Juno. And there was a whole series that Maria de Medici commissioned of Peter Paul Rubens. And this is one of them. Now, this chariot has the goddess of Lyon in it, and the lions represent Lyon.
Now it's making sense.
Yes, and she is holding, she has a crown on her head, according to the blurb, and she's holding a shield. So the story is different. But now, why do I want to include this? Because we won't share this with everybody else on the lawn, but we, in Dubious Battle, we're talking about an artist making copies and changing them to her own purpose. Well, here is a lead-in, and you may have seen the article by Lainey in the paper or the letter, and she says, and you shouldn't copy somebody's artwork. Well, here is an example from long ago. When did Jericho do this?
1832, I think.
This is 1820.
1820. He died in 1832.
Very good.
I knew 1832 was something.
24. So he had another purpose. he wanted to show lions that are free. Now, I have a few images that I've put on my iPad, and this is William Cunard's lions. So if I have time with the group, I will show them William Cunard's lions and have them compare them with Jericho. Well, I'll tell you what, there's a new 2016 calendar at the front desk, and one of the images in the calendar is this. So,
It's been of this,
but
yes.
I just think having the
fabulous.
knowledge, and again, Jane found this information just 3 days before she
Right.
went off to the hospital.
Bless her soul.
Yes.
I like it.
Yes.
I'll use it.
And I'm so pleased to have the correct story and know what the image really is all about. I can't imagine how much misinformation I've given
Yes.
out over the years.
Yes, exactly.
Telling people it's Catherine de Medici in this chariot, and it isn't at all.
Maria.
And it's Marie or Maria. I'm not sure. It was spelled both ways in the little blurb that Jane had. Okay.
I like to say about that too. Which,
Yes.
I forget. It's somebody else's line. Didn't occur to me. I call those the shampoo blow dried lions, as opposed to real lions, and as opposed to these three artists that went and saw them in
Yes.
their natural habitat.
Yeah.
All right, I'm Julie Matzke, and I'm one of the docents that are not afraid to take on kids along with Bobbi. So as a consequence of that, we tend to end up many times with groups that are multi-generational in nature, in that we have older folks and smaller folks. And many times those are groups of people who the grandparents in the audience, you can appreciate that, who have volunteered to take their grandchildren away from mom and dad for a few weeks in the summer, give mom and dad a break, and so they come here with them. And many times it's grandma and grandpa with not a small grandchild, but maybe a 10-year-old, and then the high school person has come along with them, because lo and behold, it sounded like a great idea to the high school person at the time. And so now he's on this trip with grandma and grandpa and his little siblings. So to concur with Martha, you want to find out, first of all, where they've been, what they've seen. Meeting them upstairs is a great idea. You get to read right away. As soon as grandma and grandpa get off that bus or out of that car, they've either had it because they're at the end of their 2 weeks with this grandchildren, and they're just willing to turn over the next however long you're willing to take them to you, and they'll follow along. Now, the older sibling is probably going to turn his nose up a little bit at, oh, I'm not interested in anything you have to tell me or show me in this museum. I'm just here because it sounded like a good idea 3 weeks ago. But as she said, if you speak to the youngest one of the bunch and hook that person into following you along, the rest of them will just come with. Now, the high school person may come from afar, but he will always be at the edge, because that person never wants to miss out on anything you have to say. So your concept is to hook that youngest one right off. And there's several places in the museum, including right upstairs in the amphitheater, where you can tell a story about those lost birds. And one of the lost birds, of course, was shot or killed by a 13-year-old in Ohio who was trying to provide food for his family, and it wasn't until he took that bird home to the mother that the mother actually was the one who recognized that the bird was the end of its line. So if you've got a little one, that really hooks that little one into a story about coming into the museum. There's several other places in this museum where there are hooks like that, but that's one good spot upstairs if you want to do that. So I'm going to take you into the rungus and show you a couple of other places where you can hook a group that's multi-generational.
called a treasure hunt. And we had a painting in each room, and this was the one here. And you say, in the Widener, there's so by so-and-so. And you wanted them to know who did it, what they called it, and then you always ask a question. And the question with this one was, how many polar bears do you see? And the whole point is to get children to really look and not just walk by and say there's a polar bear in the snow. So if they're asked a question, and then they finally see these tracks going up, and there's one, and some kids insist that's one, which is okay, but it's really helpful to have them ask a question. So that remember that thing we put together 150 years ago.
And another contrast with this is, I call this is white painting.
Don't you love the snow?
And you get, so look at the different shades of white, and you can talk a little about technique and about dyeing the lines and, that sort of thing. But then if the moose in moonlight is hanging, that makes a real contrast, but also by Richard Friesen. So.
Which moose, Martha?
It's a moose. It's hung sometimes. It's in our collection.
By Friesen?
Yes.
I haven't.
The one, yes, but
It's in the stacks.
Yes.
Bobbi, I've got a feeling it's the building we're in, too.
hey, yes.
That's right. Yeah.
It does have the, well, Greg McCarran used to talk about the light on the snow and the different colors in the snow. And that's such a fun thing to bring up.
Yes.
And contrasting the white of the polar bear, the
Yeah.
skin is black,
Beauty.
the whole thing.
It's a beauty.
It's my favorite.
Some of you may have heard this little story. There's some docent, and I can't tell you who it is,
I think it's Julie.
who
Was
showing
she would see that and say
showing
that.
the Lilliford to somebody, and someone in her tour group said, "Yeah, but what's that little blue patch on the duck's
Everybody
wing?"
always says that.
yeah.
What is that
And
blue
she
thing
said-
on the
And
wing?
this docent says, "Oh, that's his cell phone," which is a good way to get people to laugh.
You know what, she's not here, I think it was Ellen.
Was it Ellen?
What is
Since she's not here, it was Ellen.
It's very flashy. I like it, but I think it's very
No,
flashy.
the ducks do. The male ducks do have that blue patch.
That's on their
I
plumage.
saw one yesterday.
His study over there.
Yes, that's right.
One time I heard Bobbi giving a tour, and you talked about that picture as being one of the few women artists.
Yes.
That was
Yeah, we
interesting.
have so few.
Yeah.
And she, French gal, and the little one of the chamois is also hers. And isn't that typical of that frame? Even the little one has this ornate frame that almost takes away from taking it away.
It almost does.
One time bet 5 years ago, I gave a tour, and a woman came up to me later, and she said, "Do you know that you have a rose of the nerve here?" She said, "And you didn't even point it out to us."
Oh.
And I thought,
She wasn't French. This wasn't the French woman.
You know what? You can't win.
She was from New York.
No,
She
you
was
can't
like-
because
a woman from New York.
Okay.
you do what you can. And if you leave somebody out, well, you didn't really like her, why didn't you talk about her?
I don't think this painting was hanging. She had seen the little one of the chamois.
And this one, they put non-glare glass. At first, you just couldn't even see it at all. It was just so, but with a non-glare glass, it's easier to see.
And it was up-to-date, non-glare. It's supposed to have good qualities as opposed to the negative qualities, according to Ron.
Okay. So, she was quite a gal, and she kept up her painting, even though the guys gave her a hard time.